Hi,
Hello, hello.
how are you doing?
Keeping well in yourself. It's
I'm great, thank you.
have this chatting opportunity with you again. I know we've had our brief ones before this, but diving straight in. Looking forward to our chat
Good.
today. You, by the way.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to start us off with introductions. Hi,
Cool.
I'm Limpho Moeti. I am the producer and business developer for an indie studio in South Africa called Nyamokop. We made this really great game in 2008 before I joined called Semblance, which I'll be showing a short trailer of. Previously, I've worked at an indie studio called Free Lives, who made Broforce, Scorn, and Genital Jousting. And I was the deputy festival director for an independent video game and digital art festival in South Africa called Playtopia that usually was held in December, but obviously broadly gestures at everything. That won't be happening this year, sadly, but we'll be back in 2021. And
And
that is me.
I'm
Nick,
sure that's
please
where
take
we
it
might
away.
where we'll cross paths again, hopefully.
Hopefully, I
Um,
think so.
My name is Nick Holden. I'm the co-owner of ACGL, an esports tournament operator and events organizer. Before I dive in, I just want to also say thanks to Campus Party for putting this together, giving us the opportunity to speak and additionally meet my
Absolutely.
future drinking buddy and rock, paper, and scissors rival, Limpho. An amazing human and or just maybe a really good con artist. I'm not too sure. I'm sure it's the former, but who knows? She does carry around a Doctor Who screwdriver around on the regular, so the verdict is still out there.
That's very
Um,
true.
as I said, my name is Nick Holden. I've been working in the esports competitive gaming industry for the past 10 years, where I've been playing competitively since I was 6 years old. But before I go into that, I'm going to hand it back to Dimpo, who's going to be taking you through her side.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about the South African video game industry and sort of where we're at right now. So the industry here is still quite small. There are around 700 people, if we're very generous, who are involved in the industry in the entire country. Of those kinds of companies, we've got companies that do work for games that are not entertainment. So they do service work for companies, which is sort of where gamification comes in. We've got a bunch of independent studios, two of which I've mentioned. There's also one in Durban, which is doing pretty well for themselves. And there are a bunch of smaller independent sort of game developers on their own, places like Clockwork Acorn, QCF Designs. We have a lot of people who do work for other companies while they're making games. So who do work for international companies. So they're basically freelancers here as well. The industry is quite interesting in the sense that it is slowly growing. We have a lot more places that and universities that offer game design as a course, which is really incredible, right?
Yeah.
Because it's definitely a growing market. But generally, most of the people who graduate with game design degrees don't necessarily work in game, but have an incredibly high postgraduate work rate because a lot of other industries, especially the tech industries, want the skills that you gain from being able to make games beyond just coding and designing. So a lot of places have started using AR and VR in the work, particularly in the architecture sphere. There we go. I forgot the word for a second.
It's always good to remember them words whenever needed.
Very close.
Cool.
So within the architectural sphere,
Mm-hmm.
and a big thing within the industry right now that we're actively doing is just working on various ways to continue to grow the industry. So there are still a lot of structural difficulties in the sense of like people firstly knowing that South Africa has made some like really good world recognized games such as Semblance, such as Broforce, but also just in terms of like having access to the instruments needed to make games. I think one of the biggest things I like to tell people about the industry that it's less about how much you know and it's more about what you can do in terms of can you if you can work with the tools such as Unity, which is the engine that is most widely used on the continent to make games, that if you can work with that and you can show a strong portfolio, that you're in good standing. I mean, in terms of the other structural issues, we also still need a lot of funding to help build up studios, because unfortunately, making a prototype to get funding from a publisher is very difficult. So, and it can be quite costly. But, hopefully within the next few years, we'll start seeing more and more prototyping funds. There are a lot of places that are currently giving money to people of color and women, teams from diverse backgrounds to make video games. So it's a very exciting time to be involved in the industry. I'm quickly going to show you guys a video of the game that the company I work for has made. Let us check it out. If it will show up.
Soon enough. This is where we put the game trailer voice in. Introducing Semblance. There we go.
So yes, that is the game that they made. It is the first ever African game on a Nintendo console, and not just the Switch, but Nintendo entirely.
Just brush off your shoulder there. That's cool.
It's not even my work, right? I wasn't there when this happened, but I'll take all the credit.
That's classic.
So I mean, the exciting thing about that is to see how the industry is growing, but there's still a lot of structural challenges, even in terms of like working with publishers overseas. So when we say this is the first African game on a Nintendo console, we mean any Nintendo console ever. And even getting developers kits to build the game is incredibly difficult and very complicated in terms of like just getting the actual support. For example, Stadia isn't here in South Africa yet. I don't think it'll be for a while. And there's not even a Google server or a data center on the continent. So, I mean, that's a lot of funds that we just cannot access to make games and to grow the industry here, because I still think that there are a lot of misconceptions about the continent, and I think misconceptions about what counts as gaming. We have a lot of mobile gamers who play mobile games in South Africa, but also a lot of studios who make mobile games as well. So, I mean, hopefully in time we'll see things changing and growing. But there are those difficulties. But I will say, as difficult as it is, and as much as I miss having money, I would not be doing anything else. It is absolutely rewarding and worthwhile.
That's awesome.
I think that's me. That's my side.
Cool.
And sort of what's happening in the industry.
It's really interesting to hear certain parallels, especially with gaming, the gaming industry and your development side, that are very true in the esports environment as well. I mean, I'll touch on a couple in a second before I jump straight in, headfirst into my world of esports, which is competitive gaming. I'm not going to go obviously too descriptive in terms of exactly what that is, but if you know about being competitive and playing games, that's essentially it. From our side, we're going to try stay away, I think, during this one from too many slides. I think you refer to this one as a lechotla, I think in our last chat.
Yes.
There we go. So this is very much meant as us having a conversation and interaction with you guys. So by all means, if you want to post some questions in the chat and just maybe discuss some of the talking topics that we have, we're going to be asking each other a couple of questions as well before we jump straight in. But on that note, without further ado, how about I jump into a little bit about the esports environment and give you guys a little bit of perspective. So I guess this being a global conference, I thought we might just start on a global perspective. Esports more commonly known for major events, record-breaking attendances, huge viewing audiences, which is once again maybe buying into a little bit of a misconception of what we have locally. I thought I'd start with some of these major events that I referred to and just maybe paint a little bit of a picture for you guys in terms of having a look at where kind of South Africa or Africa plays in the context. I do bear in mind there's a little asterisk to this. This is not a perfectly accurate representation. Some of these events are slightly different, but I just thought I'd go through participation. So white dots are not included. Blue dots are included. And without further ado, let's jump in. So PUBG as a game, 2019 Global Championships in terms of the continents or countries that got included. Then we've got Overwatch World Cup. We are very grateful. I believe the team was that last year managed to come through and represent the Rhinos. And further from that, League of Legends, one of the biggest titles in the world. Once again, Africa. You might be noticing a little bit of a theme there in terms of not included. Dota 2, the international. And once again, if we're going to be tying these into areas like the Middle East and South America, I like to consider those areas as almost piggybacking off of their existing environments in terms of esports and structures, just because they've got an opportunity to play with much lower connectivity than we do. I mean, the same is relatively true of North Africa, but yeah, as we continue, Intel Extreme Masters, and it just gets sadder and sadder if you're essentially a fan of Sub-Saharan or African esports. Fortnite World Cup, I know all the Fortnite players demanding African servers, and once again, not really included just yet. Hopefully we do become included. Evo Championship Series, all you fighters, those are like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, as so on. Essentially, that's much more North American and European as well as Asia being involved with that. At the moment, they actually just announced that they're going to be moving their championships to online only just during this COVID pandemic. And then personally, one of my favorite of old time and new, I've got mixed emotions about this one, but Call of Duty League is primarily North American, if anything. I'm roping Canada in there, but that's not really included. Once again, broad spectrum in these maps. And then we've got Europe by the likes of teams like in London. So that is just to give you a perspective over what is included and what is not included. Once again, do not take those blue points as exact representations, but it's more just to highlight the conclusive point that unfortunately, South Africa or Africa doesn't get included all too often. So what does that mean? Why is this happening? So I think one of the primary things is location. Some North African communities can compete regularly against Western European players, and the same kind of thing in terms of what I mentioned of piggybacking with Middle Eastern and South American countries. Location, South Africa is unfortunate as it's one of the most expensive areas to cater to, as location is ill-suited for network, but additionally travel for major events, which means that we're largely separated. Our player base is growing, but once again, it pales compared to the international scene, which can get a lot more communities involved at once. And the lack of infrastructure also generally affects our general populace. So when we're talking about kind of just general gamers in Africa or just general populace in Africa, it's quite difficult to connect to gaming because, let's be honest, data pricing is quite expensive. There's infrastructure problems as well when it comes down to fiber connectivity. The accessibility as well as the cost of entry is still very high in gaming in Sub-Saharan Africa as well as Africa. So does that mean that that's where the ball stops, that there's no value? Does that mean that, that we've got so much against us, so why even try? No, I don't think so. I think there's value and it's growing. I think there's a way to join in the journey for Africa to get us on the map. And when I say get us on the map, it's going to rely on our backs. I don't think this is something where we need to go, we're not Europe, we're not America, we are Africa, we are South Africa, and our journey must be different as we face different restrictions, different barriers, but also different opportunities. And that's what gets me excited, is the different opportunities. So where is the potential, you might ask? So I think the potential is for us to be able to build our own scene, leveraging off one another to make this a sustainable and a rewarding environment. And I think one of the things that always gets connected to, I think, how I preach these days about esports is sustainability. We need to be able to make sure that we can represent the brands. You're more than welcome to hide the screen, by the way, on that side of things. But what I think I always like to mention on my side of things is sustainability and structure. It's so important for this to be a connectivity point, and for us to try drop the barriers of entry as much as possible to get as many people in as possible. We already know when it comes down to PC gaming how expensive that can be. Console gaming, it's relatively less expensive, but still pretty expensive, and you've got an internet connection to worry about. Mobile gaming, there's huge potential for the future of that because a lot of people have mobile gaming device, or rather mobile devices with some kind of game connected. But once again, I don't like to rope in those statistics of gaming and esports. Esports is a niche within gaming in a lot of ways, but it is a growing niche, and it is something that is bursting for attention and for provision as well. So I think there's 3 criteria that is going to be key for attachment in terms of developing the potential in sub-Saharan Africa, South Africa, respectively. So schools is a great,
Oh no, I was just about to ask you and sort of respond to the thing you're saying, where in terms of infrastructure, because I mean, in South Africa and Africa in general, more people have phones than people who have computers. So it's quite difficult to get a lot of the international players excited, or even just international companies excited about the scene here in South Africa, purely because of that kind of lack of access. I mean, it's galling.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's galling.
I absolutely agree, and it becomes difficult from a pure statistics point of view when you go look at our scene and you look at what's available to us immediately, and you go, I'm not going to invest in there in the short term. But I don't necessarily think esports is a short-term game. I really don't. I think it's a long-term gain and something that brands can leverage off of the long term, because I don't see it decreasing in terms of the amount of player base. I only see more opportunities for people to be able to connect in the future as data prices go down and infrastructure increases. And that means that when you're looking towards that scene, I'll go towards a couple of numbers in a bit in terms of how that's growing. I can at least point to some of the stats that I have directly. I don't like to use gaming stats once, because that's not necessarily playing into my environment. Even in terms of a potential audience, I think sometimes that gets measured of people going, cool, there's 20 million gamers in South Africa. Let's call it that as a broad spectrum. Esports has that potential audience. That's completely untrue. Right. Yeah, exactly. So you have a niche inside there, but you are able to grow that out. And also, in terms of the long term, you're able to build that narrative so people can also attach to that. But I'll get to that in a second. Referring back once again to structure, I think schools provide a great base for gaming in general as an extramural opportunity, but also for that key learnership of being as a part of a team for esports. I think there's some interesting models that schools are using currently in the esports environment to promote essentially almost disenfranchised students that don't necessarily connect to a regular curriculum of sports and what's offered out there. I can touch base with some of the schools that I know within my sector. I'm in Stellenbosch. You guys might know the high school Porus. From their side of things, they've got a really cool esports program that they're working on with a very passionate group of individuals, but also their teacher that's involved on that side. And I think it's an important keystone to almost become more official for esports for parents as well. I think there's a little bit of an education model that needs to be made there with parents, but also, once again, this is a long-term game. This is something that, if we're not going to be able to convince every single parent that esports is something, that will phase out as new people become parents. I'm going to one day, and hopefully the next 5 years, roundabout, they become a parent. I know a little bit more about esports. These kids will have different opportunities. It's just the education way that we grow with technology. Universities, I think, is also, you touched on a little bit about universities, transferable skills. I think that's going to be absolutely crucial inside the esports environment as well. You said sometimes pay isn't the best. I don't necessarily think that pay is just there in esports just yet. Some are getting very, very lucky, percent of a percent. And I don't even mean that as professional players. I mean, that is just kind of the general scene. But universities offer a unique opportunity to learn and to be able to push essentially the barriers of learning about esports. Additionally, on top of that, from an esports perspective, I'm quite excited. We have, from our side of things, been working on our university campaign. Last year was the very first University of South Africa Association esports event, which was hosted in Stellenbosch. Once again, very close to home, which made me happy. But that needs to be emphasized and drawn out with multiple tournament operators, multiple countries, and trying to make sure that there's a little bit more consistency in terms of a point for attachment for university students to get together to play teams to see potential. That being said, when you ask yourself, what is that potential? Yes, it does connect in a slight way to the university on the international scene, is that we just had the 2 winners of that competition actually participate in the International FISU Esports Challenge, which I believe had over 20 representative nations. And once again, that was the very first one of their kind. And that hopefully will be able to bridge itself out a little bit further as we go as well. And once again, there's going to be so many more opportunities that get built into this, but it really needs a structural foundation from the institutions. Yes, you can provide an incentive towards the top end, but you really need something that is on the ground that you can work with, so that people can connect to, how are you going to get people to put their hands on a console or a mouse and keyboard on a mobile device? You need something foundationally there that is supported. And then I guess the last one in terms of how people are going to be connected is from the public, perhaps the most important, as it has the highest growth potential in my point of view. But the biggest problem is, as you said a little bit earlier, the public barely knows about gaming, let alone esports and the opportunities within. So I think it's one of those things that as we go along, it's not going to be something that we inject and we go, here's a massive event and that's gaming. That's it. Those need to exist regularly. And I kind of refer to, I know it unfortunately got cancelled this year, but I love Rage for what it was. It was a cornerstone for gaming, for people to go, I want to find out more. And there was a unique opportunity for people to be able to see that, and being able to see the niches in between, the game development in between, to be able to open up those spectrums are quite important. We need more of that. So same kind of thing in esports. We need to be able to broaden that spectrum and to show the potential. When I refer to the potential, I said I was going to mention some numbers. I don't like to use gaming numbers, and esports numbers are even more difficult to find than local gaming numbers in South Africa. And I'm pretty sure that some marketing companies can agree with that. So from our side of things, I can say in 2018, we had around about 10,000 registered users with quite a bit of activity on the platform. 2019, 15,000 users, pretty decent. 2020, we hit 20,000 users in the beginning of January. And by September, and that's around about, 9 months, we projected to be hitting around about 40,000 registered users. So it's almost a 2x growth rate, which is really exciting for us. And that just means we've got people to grab and say, hey, point you in a direction, which is important. And that's why we've always tried to say we try to make that as welcoming, but also engaging as possible. There's a lot of improvements that need to be made along the line. It's one of those things, unfortunately, that if we had more time, more input, more monetary, all that kind of jazz that we can do, but we also work together with our local partners to be able to make that happen. But I think it's something that shows an exciting growth rate in Africa. So the last thing is kind of just where to next. What does this mean for us in sub-Saharan Africa? We need to try support local as much as possible. We need to try get ourselves in these structural positions to educate and provide opportunities for other people to run their own tournaments, run their own events, run whatever it may be, even educational opportunities. Each one of us, I know, are doing our best. Sometimes I know it's the scene saying we can't work together, we can work together. I'm not bothered about that politics. It's all about just focusing on what you believe is your goals and aspirations. And for us, that goal and aspiration has always been to try build sustainably and build regularly, and to be able to point towards something that is achievable. And as that goes, it's going to be the most difficult time in the beginning, because that's where you have to dig your feet in the trenches and say, I hope passion takes me through this in a lot of ways. Whereas hopefully that becomes something that you can go, cool, I can earn a salary out of this. I can start paying other people their salary out of this. And that's where it's transitioning to, at least I believe from our side of things. It needs to take that step further. But I think the biggest thing is we just need to promote a culture of trying to build sustainably. I keep on harping on this fact. And once again, one of the things in esports, please, any marketing company or any business, this is not, in sub-Saharan Africa, this is not a viewership thing. Unfortunately, we don't get decent enough viewers to be able to push what we have. This is a participation thing for me. I think the more active participants that we have, the more that we can promote a culture of us actually getting together, meeting one another, making friends, developing rivalries, telling those stories. That is what is 10 times more valuable than us driving an audience just towards a stream, because the one will lead to the other, not vice versa. So that's my spiel for esports right now. I could probably go into this for days, but thank you for that time. And I guess let's maybe go into some questions that I know I want to ask you from your side of things, because there's definitely some draw through lines for both of us.
There are absolutely some draw through lines. I also have some questions for you. So do you want to ask your questions first, and then I can ask my questions next, or shall we like flip it around?
Let's go back and forth. Maybe play a little bit of question table tennis here, and then also encouraging anybody in the chats. I don't know which way. It's probably that way. Just quick high five. How do we do this?
There you are.
So just make sure you ask your questions, guys.
Yeah, please,
and then
please ask
we'll
questions.
jump into. So I think one of the things that orientated me was passion, first and foremost, for you, and where you are at. You said you wouldn't necessarily trade this job for the world in a lot of ways because it's passion driven, right?
Passion driven.
So why do you think that's so important in this sector, especially in its early stages?
I think it's very important because to really make games, because it's such a creative thing, I think you have to really love games. It needs to feel as though this is the thing that you can't imagine doing anything else, to help push through the harder points. Obviously, because it's a small industry and it's still growing, it can be very difficult, especially in the early stages, to build your company, to build a game. And to make it through all of that, I think you have to be deeply passionate about just making games, even if no one wants to play them, just because it's something that you need to get out, that you're interested in exploring and understanding. And for me personally, it's sort of a passion on two fronts. On the one end, making incredible games. So currently what we're doing at Nyamakop is that we're making African-inspired games for a global audience, because we've seen this lack of these kinds of very interesting and diverse stories within the gaming sphere. And it's very obvious that a lot of people are very hungry for that kind of content. And we're hungry to make that kind of content because it's exciting for us. But on a second level, we are also interested in creating a truly demographically representative industry within the country, and putting money into helping grow and build both the game playing community and the game making community. I think the sense of community is something that really keeps us together, that ability to know that there are people who support you, that you can talk to about the issues, that you can learn from and work with. It makes it such an incredible and really fulfilling experience. I mean, I'm not getting paid terribly. I think my boss is watching this.
How dare you say this? How dare you?
You can definitely earn a living, and if you're one of the lucky % of a percent whose games do really well, you can live a very nice life. But it's definitely something that you can earn a living in. It just takes a lot of time and still requires that growth within the industry. I just want to touch on that again, because I always use my platforms to advocate for prototype funding, is to just fund prototypes, because that's really the best way to begin building studios and making it sustainable growth, versus just you have enough money for this one game and you kind of need to make a plan from there. But having that like ability to really build a good solid prototype and take time and hire people makes it infinitely easier to get funding from publishers. And the nice exciting thing is there are literally hundreds of publishers, and a lot of them are starting to look at Africa, and in particular South Africa, to find that kind of talent, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it's just the watering of the seeds, right? I mean, to be honest, that's so difficult. I mean, you're this little plant in this big, absolutely international competitive side, and all you're looking is, can somebody give me a little bit of water to actually grow, to become recognizable? And at the moment, we're putting stilts in there. We're trying to get funds to be able to support these things with matchsticks. I completely get that. I understand.
But I mean, I think what I always try and remind people who are interested in game development is that because of how many games there are, like there are just thousands of games released almost every day. A very big thing is to figure out what your niche is, because when you look at it in terms of like, who am I making this game for? You'll realize that the audience is actually a lot bigger than you think it is if you look at it internationally. And there are a lot of like really interesting models of how we could grow the industry in South Africa, but they're not, you can't just look at, you know, Poland and go, cool, Poland did this, so we're just going to take everything that Poland did and
Yeah,
just do the exact
exactly.
same thing here, and everything will be
Exactly.
fine. It's not quite like that, but there are a lot of models that we can look to and learn from and start establishing here as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are a lot of places that do really interesting work. We've got Sea Monster that does games as education, which I think is also vitally important in a growing sector of the industry as well. It's just to tie back to what you're saying about schools as well, and how important sort of not getting to the kids. I sound like a
No.
we will get these kids into gaming.
We will find these kids and we'll get them involved with gaming.
We'll make them play games.
It's all working out.
But I mean, like, that infrastructure is so vitally important. I mean, I would love to ask you, what do you think, because you speak a lot about sustainability, and what do you think is the biggest part of creating a sustainable industry, and what do you think some of the pitfalls are for esports?
Well, I think that the biggest thing for sustainability is proving your deliverables, because as soon as brands come in, you can go, hey, this is esports. Look at all these amazing things. And you're currently looking at an esports stage that's more than likely in Europe. You're looking at a prize pool. You're looking at profession. That is not established. What we have here is completely different. So it's about being authentic with that. Also, I think the biggest thing there is you want brands and you want the money to keep flowing in terms of being able to deliver on whatever your promise is, right? Because if you're delivering that and people are getting what they want out of it, they should want to invest again, and they should want to be able to buy back in. And then hopefully at that point, you can do something a little bit more creative and take it a little bit of a step further and bring them more value. I think that is really, really important in terms of being able to build a sustainable culture. I think what's happened in esports a lot of the time is that, like you mentioned with Poland, lovely environments, whatever's happening there, we're going to copy and we're going to paste. Doesn't work in our environment, unfortunately. It's also a very expensive exercise. So I think we need to define our value, which even for us as a company early on was very difficult to do. It's like, how do I put a value on X or Y, or what is that? And that's something that you constantly need to remind yourself, and also see what even traditional marketing value is on what you're doing. Because there is a, from my research at least, there's a definite differentiation there, but you, as esports, in terms of where we're standing, we need to almost go lower than that bar so we can offer an input and say, well, you're getting X deliverable here at market value cost. We're coming here and saying, you know what, we promise you're going to get that, but it's going to be a bit cheaper, just so you can try it out. So I think that's how you build a sustainable culture. I think in terms of a truly sustainable culture is that we need to be able to provide the value to institutions. And show them why there's going to be a growth point in esports and why there's opportunities there. I think that was most successfully done most recently with Moeti's, with our side of things, Stellenbosch University. They saw a value in there. Hopefully we're going to be able to take that further. You never know. Institutions also, unfortunately, have the lovely barrier of red tape. So it always makes things a little bit difficult at times. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is we just need to be respectful of our value in the scene. Otherwise, we're just going to shortfall ourselves in the long run.
No, absolutely. That is a very useful answer. I'm actually going to quickly throw a question to you that we've got in the chat. It's exciting.
Oh, nice.
So Alen Neary asks, Nick, what do you think it will take to get SA gamers to support streamers? Sadly, too many gamers demand free entry into events and won't watch streams or support companies that are backing esports.
Yeah, we're a very privileged community in a lot of ways. I say that because we've been based on a history of a lot of stuff being provided for free that almost shouldn't be. But that presents with it some of its own unique challenges and opportunities. And I think it's not on the impetus of the player necessarily to change their attitude completely. You can have that discussion for them. But let me tell you, trying to convince an audience, sometimes you're not going to convince everybody. You might get 10%. 20%, 40%, 60%, just depends on how lucky you are. You're not going to convince everybody that your thing is the bee's knees and they need to be able to pay X, unfortunately. So we have to look at different opportunities, and sometimes it's a little bit more laborsome on our shoulders. But when it goes down to what you're saying, what do you think will take to get SA streamers to support streamers?
SA gamers to support
SA
streamers.
gamers to support streamers. I think once again we're competing in a very difficult market when it comes down to streamers, because guess what? You're not just competing against John that lives down the street that's also streaming. And it's not a localized competition. You're on the international front as soon as you go live. This stream, in essence, is competing against any other stream on this platform at the moment. So what are we doing from a streamer's perspective to make sure that there's an engagement? That means that, one, you've got an opportunity to build a personable relationship. So once again, it's difficult to say from an SA gamer's perspective to convince that audience. It's kind of what I was touching on a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
It's on the impetus of that individual that is streaming to say, how am I going to approach this differently? How am I going to build an audience? How am I going to set myself structured goals? But also at the same time, I think the most important thing is that people aren't seeing the opportunity to support the streamer that is gaining success. So okay, I'm doing my streams at the moment. I'm pretty good at video editing. Let's just say that's a component of what I do. I'm not really getting an audience. How about I start doing small little video editing packages for other people and charge them, say it's $100 or whatever. Then you've got something a little bit more sustainable to work with, build up your portfolio, go from there. I know there's admins for streams that essentially charge. So once again, it's promoting the culture of there's job opportunities in here. It's not necessarily what you wanted towards the top end. I wanted to be a professional esports player for Call of Duty. That didn't work out. So I eventually started hosting tournaments, broadcasting, doing that kind of stuff. But that's the fall off. But the fall off shouldn't be an end point. There should be a plug-in opportunity. There's a point, unfortunately, where we're comparing drive and passion to real sustainability once again.
Yeah.
And
I think
if you don't have that drive and passion to be able to get through that point of, okay, I can develop a decent salary and try and make this step going forward, then that's where you're just like, well, my hands are up. I'm done with gaming. Cheers, everybody, as I see a tweet every month or so.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's also definitely what I've noticed just in terms of like getting South African gamers interested in the content we create. I'm going to sneeze again.
1, 2, 3, bless you. Nailed it.
There's also, I think, a barrier with just South African pop culture in general, where I think that there's still this mentality that if it's made here, it's not as good as an international product, which
until
is
it becomes international.
Until it becomes international, until someone from overseas co-signs what a South African is doing, we sadly don't take our own stuff seriously. So I think that
can
can
I
be
use an example?
Yes.
You know that John Cena song? I remember a person hearing that for the first time and going, oh, that's absolute garbage. Can't listen to the song. Next thing, it's international on Ellen's show. And they're like, oh, John Cena. It's like the best song ever. So as soon as it's international, gets like almost a verified tick on Twitter. Cool, I'm verified, and now you can actually enjoy me. There is a perception there of local not necessarily being comparable to international, which once again, we can only challenge that with time.
We can exactly with time and by sort of being able to show people what we've done. I mean, like a lot of people would love a game like Broforce or Semblance and then be like, oh my God, I didn't know it was made here. And I'm sitting here like, how many fucking talks do I have to do?
No, that's but honestly, I completely understand
the work you have to put in. And I think sometimes we also almost feel like we're owed that allegiance, but I think we still have to remember that as people who create products, we have to prove ourselves and work harder. It's not fair, but I also think that the world's not fair. And it ends up with us, those who can survive through it, end up making better products because we're pushed to innovate and to think creatively 100%. And to really figure out ways to grab people and ask ourselves what makes us different from anyone else. Like why, beyond the fact that I'm South African, like why should people be watching my streams? We have another question for you, Nick. See,
cool. Before I go into that question,
don't do anything. It's always about esports.
I do want to ask, I do want to ask you one thing. In terms of structures at the moment, you mentioned universities being transferable in terms of their skill sets. So for you, what do you want to see more from the educational front to create more jobs? Because I know even from me, from an esports perspective, that I need anybody that's going to be involved with a front-facing aspect of a business needs to know that industry. I can't have a person tweeting about Angry Birds. It's got nothing to do with competitive. From a gaming perspective, what needs to be done to be able to bridge that gap towards more gaming opportunities?
Sure. So I'm gonna say two things. Firstly, when you said Angry Birds, I had this flashback to being at a bar in Johannesburg and hanging out like after one of the events there,
Yeah.
and like some because like in Joburg sometimes random people will come and talk to you, and I just have this like flashback to being mansplained about the gaming industry
Oh
by
shit.
someone who wasn't in it, and I was sitting there like, oh, I should remember not to swear on air. I'm so sorry. And I was just like, do you like I work there.
Yeah.
I know this.
This is what I
You're just
do.
telling me things I know. But to answer your question, I think
Mm.
it's less so much coming from the universities because the universities are doing a very good job in terms of like providing people with the opportunities and the equipment necessary to sort of start building games and really giving them a good foundational course in understanding game making and how
Yeah.
to take it
100%.
further. Honestly, I think a lot of the support needs to come from government, which is difficult
Tough.
because this has the ability to create like not a huge amount of jobs, but quite a few very high skilled jobs that can bring in a lot of revenue into the country. And so we need the government support to help, build and sustain companies that can take in those graduates and can take in very talented people. So
Mm.
I mean, in terms of the support we need, it's support like, funding studios, funding prototypes, it's support such as ensuring that the process to getting certified with their new film and publication board is a much easier process. It's
Mm.
about like really putting support into, computational services for younger kids who don't have access to those things and like really getting people in front of coding and art. It's really about actively supporting the industry that exists already so that it can grow much more and be able to take in more people into the industry. So
Yeah.
I think that for me, the universities are doing a fair amount already because, those kids are graduating and they're hella talented, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, there just isn't enough jobs for them yet within the
Yeah.
industry. So it's about figuring out how to grow that industry, making sure internet is more accessible and cheaper, making sure that like the way we do computers and stuff and like figuring out ways to drop the prices on those so that it's easier to have access to those oh gosh, I've got tools, excuse me.
Yeah.
And that's a very big and important part of it, I think. So that would be my
100%.
answer. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Let's see what the next question is. So Nick,
Cool.
what
Yes.
platforms do you think, this is from Umar Bradlow, what platforms do you think is best for streaming your tournaments? YouTube or Twitch? What are the pros and cons of each?
All right. So when it comes down to YouTube and Twitch, I think Twitch's biggest problem is just in-game service. So it's essentially you need to be able to get authentication so you can stream at a decent quality. Personally, I like YouTube for a number of reasons. I think in terms of a South African context, it's more of a general enough platform for us to be able to grow our audience. A bit more specifically, I think Twitch in a South African context isn't as well known outside of gamers. And I think we just want to be able to create a point for people to enter and attach to gaming. So I think that the potential audience on YouTube in South Africa is actually higher than Twitch. There might be some that disagree with me. I know Twitch offers you a lot more tools for a streamer to engage with their audience, but maybe once again, that's where you either need to make a little bit of an extra effort on YouTube to be able to engage. But YouTube has a great way of highlighting content. So if you have past content, it lives there in a very, very like well-suited manner for you to be able to grab that. So if I said, go to Twitch to stream, I'd say make sure you upload those VODs, edit them, and put them on YouTube so people can still grab them and still be able to see them and still be able to attach to your personality. I think for me, I would go with YouTube because it does that natively. It grabs the content, it lives there afterwards. People go watch, especially tournaments after the fact, to see what is the other person doing, what are they doing with their moves and strategies. But if we had to go towards Twitch, I would make sure that the content would live on YouTube afterwards as well. So for me, it's if you want the all-inclusive solution, I'd go for YouTube in terms of quality settings, making sure that you're a wider public audience. But if you actually want to be able to increase that even further, go to Twitch, but then put the content back onto YouTube if you can.
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely. That is a very good answer. Okay, looks like we're down to our last 5 minutes. This has been a delight. Nick, do
Absolute
you have
pleasure.
any parting shots?
Parting ones is just, I guess from my side of things, it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you. I think we've been in
It's
each
been
other's
such a pleasure.
circles, but we've never actually met. So thank you once again to Campus Party for this opportunity and for being able to give us the opportunity to actually speak to one another. And then
Yeah,
further
for
from
sure.
that, I guess if anybody else wants to speak to us, maybe we can just throw to a couple of places to be able to get hold of us. Ladies first.
Yes. So again, as Nick said, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been delightful. Nick, you are a great human and definitely a future drinking mate.
Yes.
This has been such a fun conversation. If you want to, we can add it to the chat, which is great because you'll find me on Instagram and Twitter. I've been forced to tweet more at just Limpho, but obviously it's spelled like my name is spelled and not how I pronounced it, so that can be quite tricky. Please follow me. You'll get some great quality content about K-pop and the gaming industry. and and any random silly thoughts of mine. It'll be a fucking blast. So please, a freaking blast. Please, can you guys? I'm gonna get blocked, guys.
100%.
Please follow me. Thank you all so much, and please ask me any questions you have about the industry. I'm always happy to answer questions. Thank you so much, Campus Party, for this amazing opportunity.
Cool.
And that's
I guess
me.
from my side, if you want to get hold of me, my details will be in the chat. It is at Holden ZA, pretty much any social media. Actually, no, there's a couple I'm missing because I'm just not young and hip enough, unfortunately. And then there is Twitter for African Gaming. So that's ACGL, essentially the company that runs tournaments in esports. Then Facebook, it's /African Cyber Gaming League. It's a mouthful. I know, Facebook, come on, give us that ACGL. And then Instagram, it's African Esports. So it's 3 different ones. I just want one consistent one, but apparently 4 letters is too much to ask from social platforms.
Yeah, apparently.
Anyway, we'll try.
But it's pretty exciting. I'm definitely going to stalk you on all of those platforms. It's going to be It's going to be
Semblance
delightful.
is so cool. It is such a fun game.
Such
it
a great
really
game.
is.
Yeah.
I remember playing it like ages ago at MWeb Game Zone, and then it's like create your own kind of journey, but puzzle solving. So it's really dope. Check it out.
Check it out. It is a great game, and you'll be hearing more from Nyamakop in the future. Everyone, Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for everyone who asked us questions. We really appreciate it, even though nobody asked me any questions.
I asked you questions. Get out of here. All right, everybody. Thanks so much.
All right, everybody. Have a great night. Thank you. Or great day. Bye.